Cavour Station hung in the darkness of space like a fortress built to outlast civilizations. Massive docking rings surrounded its armored core. Thousands of cargo vessels moved through its ports every day, carrying fuel, weapons, ammunition, and supplies to the Vrathan war machine. It wasn't just another military installation. It was the heart of the enemy's logistics network. 3 entire Vrathan battle groups depended on it. Destroy Cavour, and the enemy's advance would grind to a halt. Leave it standing, and the war would continue for years. The coalition had already learned that lesson the hard way. Twice. Both assaults had ended in catastrophe. Hundreds of ships lost. Thousands of soldiers killed. Cavour Station hadn't even lost a single docking ring. Now, inside the coalition flagship, commanders from dozens of species gathered around a massive tactical display. Commander Hanna watched silently as Captain Tay examined the records of both failed operations. He didn't speak. He simply studied every movement, every formation, every command, every casualty report. 5 minutes later, he closed the files. They're garbage. The room froze. Several coalition admirals stared at him in disbelief. One officer's face darkened with anger. Those plans were created by our finest strategists. Tay nodded calmly. I know. That's the problem. Silence spread across the briefing room. He activated the first battle replay. You approached from predictable vectors. Enemy sensor coverage appeared. Every coalition fleet had entered from the exact routes the Vrathan expected. They saw you hours before you arrived. Another display appeared. You announced your presence by running active scans. Bright sensor pulses spread across the hologram. The moment you searched for them, they knew exactly where you were. Another replay. Another mistake. You tried to preserve the station. He looked around the room. You wanted to capture it intact. Several officers nodded. It was strategically valuable. Tay folded his arms. So you hesitated. The room remained silent. You worried about damaging enemy infrastructure. They worried about killing you. The difference was obvious. The Vrathan weren't trying to save the station. They were using it as bait. He looked directly at the assembled commanders. They knew exactly what you were going to do. Because you fight according to rules. They fight to win. No one argued. Because deep down, they knew he was right. Lieutenant Giwan stepped forward. She replaced the old battle plans with a completely new tactical display. This, she said quietly, is how humans would solve the problem. The hologram changed. The room immediately fell silent. Several coalition officers looked horrified. Commander Hanna felt a chill run down her spine. There were no elegant formations, no layered attack waves, no defensive screens, no negotiations, only one direct strike. Simple. Fast. Brutal. You can't be serious, one admiral whispered. Giwan ignored him. Our fleet exits faster than light travel, less than 3,000 kilometers from the station. Gasps echoed around the room. That's suicide. No civilization performs an FTL drop that close to a gravity well. The navigation error alone could destroy the fleet. Giwan simply continued. The Vrathan won't expect it. She zoomed the map closer. They'll have less than 12 seconds to react. Captain Tay took over. Before their defense systems come online, we launch kinetic impactors. One coalition general frowned. Kinetic? No explosives. No plasma. No antimatter. Tay looked around the room. Just solid tungsten rods. Silence. One officer actually laughed. Rocks? You want to destroy the most heavily defended station in this sector? By throwing rocks? Tay smiled. Very fast rocks. He tapped the display. The simulation began. The tungsten projectiles accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. They struck Cavour Station. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the station simply disappeared. The kinetic energy alone ripped through armor, designed to survive nuclear bombardment. Docking rings shattered. Reactors collapsed. The station tore itself apart from the inside. The simulation ended. Estimated destruction, 99.8%. Not a single officer spoke. Commander Hana slowly looked from the ruined hologram to Captain Tay. You planned this? Without ever setting foot inside our command? Tay shrugged. We've been studying your wars. He looked around the room. You keep trying to fight fair. His voice became quiet. The Vrathan don't. He paused. So why are you still playing by rules? That only your enemies obey? The room fell into complete silence. For the first time since the war had begun, the coalition realized they hadn't been losing because they were weaker. They had been losing because they were fighting yesterday's war, and humanity had already learned how to fight tomorrow's. Tungsten rods accelerated to a significant percentage of light speed. No energy signature to detect. No time to raise shields. Just mass and velocity. That will kill everyone on the station, one of Hana's officers protested. Yes, Captain Tay agreed. That is the point. This is war, not a police action. We are not here to arrest them. We are here to remove their ability to kill your people. The coalition officers looked uncomfortable, but Hana noticed none of them argued further. They had seen too much death already. Their moral certainty was cracking under the weight of extinction. After the initial bombardment, Marine teams will board through the breaches, Tay continued. They will secure key areas and ensure no data survives. We will leave nothing for them to analyze or learn from. When do we begin? Hana asked. Tay checked his chronometer. The fleet is already moving into position. We strike in 6 hours. 6 hours later, Hana stood on the bridge of her ship, positioned safely behind the human battle line. She watched the tactical display as human vessels approached Kavor Station. The Varathian had no idea what was coming. Their sensors detected the coalition fleet and began their standard defensive protocols. They had done this before. They would destroy the attackers and continue their war. Then the human ships released their kinetic weapons. Hana had seen energy weapons before. Bright beams of light that looked almost clean, but kinetic weapons were different. The tungsten rods were invisible until impact. One moment the station shields were active, the next moment, those shields simply ceased to exist. Overwhelmed by the sheer mass and velocity of the projectiles, the rods punched through the station's hull like it was made of paper. Explosions blossomed across its surface, as atmosphere vented and power systems overloaded. In less than 30 seconds, the mighty Vrathan fortress was reduced to a dying wreck. Marine teams, you are clear for boarding. Captain Tay's voice came over the communication channel. Hana watched as small assault craft launched from the human ships. They did not approach carefully through docking ports. They flew directly to the massive holes the kinetic weapons had created and entered through open space. Activate visual feed, Hana ordered. She needed to see this. The display showed helmet camera footage from the human Marines. Sergeant Day led the first team. They flew through the breach in powered armor that looked more like small vehicles than suits. The armor was thick, angular, covered in weapons and equipment. Inside the station, the Vrathan were trying to organize a defense. They were large creatures, heavily muscled with natural armor plating. They carried plasma weapons that could melt through most coalition materials. The Marines did not take cover. They advanced directly toward the enemy. Plasma bolts struck Sergeant Day's armor. The energy dissipated across abaleve plates. Warning indicators showed on his heads-up display, but he kept moving forward. He raised his weapon and returned fire. Human weapons were different from coalition designs. They did not use energy. They used small metal projectiles accelerated by chemical reactions, ancient technology by coalition standards, but devastatingly effective. The bullets tore through wrath and armor that had stopped coalition energy weapons. The enemy soldiers fell back in confusion. Nothing should penetrate their natural protection this easily. Private Yoon took a direct plasma hit to the chest. The impact threw him backward against a bulkhead. His armor's medical systems immediately flooded his body with trauma medications and began sealing the breach. Yoon, report, Sergeant Day ordered. Armor compromised, chest plate at 40%, medical systems compensating. I am still combat effective. The private stood up and continued fighting. He had taken a hit that would have killed any coalition soldier, and he simply got back up. The Vrathan began to panic. These creatures should be dead. They took hits that would stop anyone else, and they just kept coming. They advanced through enemy fire like machines, like something that did not understand fear or pain. Hana watched in horrified fascination As the Marines cleared section after section, they moved with practice efficiency, covering each other, checking corners, eliminating threats. This was not just fighting. This was warfare refined over thousands of years of practice. But what disturbed her most was not the fighting itself. It was the small details. The humans booby-trapped corridors behind them, setting explosives that would kill Vrath and reinforcements. They accessed the station's environmental systems and vented atmosphere in sections where enemy soldiers were gathering. They used psychological warfare, playing sounds over the station speakers that made the Rathan disoriented and afraid. These were not the clean, honorable tactics the Coalition used. These were the methods of predators who fought to win at any cost. In 27 minutes, Kavor Station fell. The Vroan survivors surrendered, something they had never done before. When human Marines found them huddled in a storage bay, their weapons discarded, the creatures would not even look at their captors. Their body language showed complete submission. Captain Tay's face appeared on the communication screen. Station secured. Enemy casualties approximately 4,000. Our casualties, 3 injured, none serious. We are extracting intelligence data now. 4,000 dead. The number made Hana feel sick. But then she pulled up the casualty reports from the previous Coalition attempts to take this station. 8,000 Coalition soldiers dead, and they had not even damaged the facility. The mathematics were brutal but clear. Human methods saved lives. Coalition lives. Commander Hana, we are detecting Vrathan communications across multiple channels. Her communications officer reported. They are broadcasting distress calls. They are reporting that they encountered unknown hostile forces. They are calling humans demons that do not die. Hana looked at the tactical display. The humans had achieved in less than an hour what the Coalition could not do in months of trying. They had broken a Wraithan stronghold and done it with minimal friendly casualties, but they had done it by abandoning everything the Coalition believed about civilized warfare. Captain Tay's image remained on the screen. Commander, we are ready to begin training your forces in human tactics. We have approximately 100 breath prisoners who can provide intelligence on their military structure, and we have sent a message to their command that will make them understand what they are now facing. What message? Hana asked. We did not send words, Lieutenant Giwan answered. We sent the combat footage, all of it unedited. We want them to see exactly what happened here. We want them to understand that the rules of this war have changed. Hana understood the strategy. The humans were not just fighting a military war, they were fighting a psychological one. They wanted the Vroan to be afraid. They wanted them to lose before the battle even began. It was manipulative. It was calculated. It was ruthless. It was effective. Begin the training, Hana ordered. Teach my officers everything you know. Over the following days, human instructors spread throughout the Coalition fleet. They taught aggressive maneuvers that terrified cautious Coalition captains. They demonstrated boarding tactics that seemed suicidal, but produced remarkable results. They explained concepts like acceptable losses and strategic sacrifice that made Coalition ethicists physically ill. But most importantly, they taught the Coalition something they had forgotten in their thousands of years of peace: how to fight like their survival depended on it. Because it did. Word spread through both fleets. The Coalition forces whispered about the Deathworlders who had turned the tide. The Vrothan command held emergency meetings trying to understand what had happened at Kavor Station. In the human fleet, Captain Tay reviewed the intelligence data with his staff. Lieutenant Giwan analyzed Vrothan supply chains and identified weak points. Sergeant Day trained Coalition Marines in close-quarters combat, teaching them that armor was meant to be used aggressively, not defensively. The war was changing. The Vrathan had grown accustomed to fighting an enemy that fought with one hand tied behind their back. Now they faced an enemy that fought with both hands, with teeth, with anything available. They faced Deathworlders. And across the galaxy, the balance of power began to shift. And the Vrathan began to understand that this war, which they thought they were winning, had suddenly become a fight for their own survival. Supreme Commander Vorgthak of the Vrathan Dominion stared at the strategic map with growing rage. In 3 cycles of war, they had conquered 40 systems and eliminated billions of Coalition citizens. They had been unstoppable. Then the humans arrived, and in 6 weeks, the Vrathan had lost everything they gained and more. We must strike at their source, Vorgthak declared to his war council. We must attack Earth itself. If we destroy their homeworld, they will lose their will to fight. Without humans, the Coalition will collapse back into weakness. His generals agreed. It was the only strategy that made sense. The Vrathan had never faced defeat before. They would not accept it now. They gathered every available ship, 3,000 vessels, the largest fleet in Vrathan history. They would punch through the coalition lines and strike directly at humanity's home. They would crack Earth's crust and boil its oceans, just as they had done to Turs 7. They would show the galaxy what happened to those who opposed the Dominion. The fleet departed in secret, using captured coalition navigation data to plot a course directly to the Sol system. They would arrive in 18 hours. The coalition fleet was scattered across multiple systems, responding to wrath and raids. There would be no help. Earth would stand alone. Lieutenant Junho stood in the Defense Command Center in Seoul, monitoring the orbital platforms. He was young for his position, only 25, but he had trained his entire life for moments like this. Every human did. The alarm systems activated simultaneously across the planet. Every screen showed the same message. Hostile fleet detected. Multiple enemy vessels entering system. Estimated arrival, 18 hours. Get me fleet command, Junho ordered. The communication officer looked grim. Sir, Admiral Hun's fleet is 16 hours away at maximum speed. Mars defense forces are launching, but they cannot stop a fleet this size. Earth defense forces are on their own until reinforcements arrive. Junho felt his heart hammering, but kept his voice steady. Then we hold for 18 hours. Activate all defense protocols, mobilize the reserves, and send a message to the civilian population. Shelter in place. Prepare for ground combat if necessary. Around the world, humans received the alert. In cities and towns, people moved quickly to designated shelters, but many did not hide. They went to armories and collected weapons. They prepared defensive positions. They readied themselves to fight. Earth had eliminated war among its nations 50 years ago, but they never stopped training for it. Every city had bunkers that could survive orbital bombardment. Every citizen completed military training. Every street could become a battlefield because humans knew something the rest of the galaxy did not understand. Being peaceful was a choice, but knowing how to fight was a necessity. The lunar bases released their first wave of missiles as the Vrathan fleet entered weapons range. Thousands of nuclear-tipped warheads, ancient weapons by coalition standards, but devastatingly effective. The Vrath and shields absorbed the initial impacts, but the sheer number overwhelmed their defenses. Ships took damage. Crews died, but they pushed forward. 3,000 ships against one planet. The mathematics favored the Vrathan. Then the asteroid belt activated. Humans had been mining the asteroid belt for decades. What the Vrathan did not know was that every mining station doubled as a weapons platform. Hundreds of asteroids hollowed out and filled with kinetic launch systems opened fire simultaneously. Rocks the size of buildings accelerated to tremendous speeds, began hammering the Vrathan fleet. They did not need to be accurate. At these velocities, even a glancing hit could a ship. The Vrathan pressed their attack. They lost ships, but they had ships to lose. They reached Mars orbit and faced another wave of defenders. Atmospheric fighters launched from the Red Planet's bases. Swarms of small craft piloted by humans who had grown up in the lower gravity. Private Yoon recovered from his injuries at Kavor Station, led a fighter squadron against a Vrathan battlecruiser. His craft was tiny compared to the enemy vessel, but he knew exactly where to hit it. Target the sensor arrays, he ordered his squadron. Blind them first, kill them second. The fighters darted around the battlecruiser like insects, too small and fast for the heavy weapons to track. They fired missiles into sensor clusters and communication arrays. Within minutes, the massive ship was deaf and blind, unable to coordinate with the rest of its fleet. But there were too many Vrathan ships. The defenders could not stop them all. Dozens of enemy vessels broke through the outer defenses and reached Earth orbit. They began bombardment. Kinetic strikes hit cities. Buildings collapsed. People died, but the shelters held, and from those shelters, humans emerged with weapons. In Seoul, Lieutenant Junho watched as Vrath and dropships descended toward the city. They were bringing ground forces, expecting to find terrified civilians. They found something else. The first Vrathan soldiers to land encountered heavy weapons fire from civilian defenders. Shopkeepers who had military training, teachers who knew how to operate anti-armor rockets, children barely old enough to hold rifles, protecting their younger siblings. Junho coordinated the defense from the command center. All units used the prepared kill zones. Let them advance into the trapped areas, then close the exits. They want to fight in our city. We will show them what home field advantage means. The Vrathan were confused. They had fought coalition species before. When they landed on those worlds, civilians fled or surrendered. Earth civilians fought like trained soldiers because they were. Every human was a potential soldier. Earth had not forgotten that survival meant being ready to fight at any moment. Sergeant Day arrived with a Marine detachment, pushing through the chaos to reinforce the city's defensive perimeter. He found a group of civilians holding an intersection against a Brathian assault unit. "Who is in command here?" Day shouted. A woman in civilian clothes, her face covered in dust, waved him over. "I am high school principal, retired Army sergeant. We have been holding this position for 2 hours. We are low on ammunition, but we are not retreating." Day looked at the defensive position. It was textbook perfect. Overlapping fields of fire, protected positions, clear sightlines. "You are doing well," he told her. "My Marines will take over. Get your people to the evacuation zone." "Evacuation?" The woman laughed harshly. "This is our city. We are not leaving." That was humanity in a nutshell. Day thought. Too stubborn to know when to quit. The battle for Seoul raged for 6 hours. The Vathenan had superior numbers and better weapons. But they were fighting in an urban environment against defenders who knew every street, every building, every hidden approach. And the humans simply would not stop. They took casualties that would have broken any other species and kept fighting. They ran out of ammunition and switched to improvised weapons. They were exhausted and injured, but refused to surrender, because this was Earth. This was home. And humans did not give up their homes without making the enemy pay for every centimeter in blood. In orbit, the Vrathan fleet was being systematically destroyed. The initial bombardment had used most of their ammunition. They were running low on fuel and human reinforcements were arriving. Admiral Hyun's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system and immediately opened fire. They did not slow down. They did not announce their presence. They simply started killing enemy ships. "All vessels maximum aggression," Hyan ordered. "The enemy is on our homeworld. Show them what that means." The human ships fought with a fury the Vrathan had never seen. Captains made ramming runs that sacrificed their vessels, but took out multiple enemy ships. Crews fought damaged ships until they exploded, buying time for others to escape. Every human in that fleet was willing to die to protect Earth. On the planet's surface, Lieutenant Junho received the update. "Sir Admiral Hyun's fleet has engaged. Orbital superiority shifting to our favor. Ground forces are reporting Vrathan retreat in multiple sectors." Junho allowed himself a moment of relief. They had held 18 hours of desperate fighting, and they had held. The Vrathan fleet tried to escape, but human pursuit craft were already moving to intercept. And this time there would be no mercy. The Vrathan had attacked Earth. They had killed civilians on the human homeworld. That was not something humanity forgave. By the time the battle ended, the Vrathan had lost over half their fleet, trying to conquer a single Deathworld city. The rest fled in complete disarray, abandoning their ground forces, desperate to escape. Sergeant Day stood in the ruins of downtown Seoul, surrounded by exhausted human defenders. Civilians and soldiers together, covered in dust and blood, but alive. "They thought attacking our home would break us," Day said to no one in particular. "They do not understand. Attacking our home just makes us angrier." Commander Hana, arriving with the coalition relief forces, surveyed the damage to Earth. Cities were scarred. Millions were dead or injured. But the planet stood. The humans had held. She watched as human civilians emerged from shelters, immediately beginning rescue operations and rebuilding efforts. No panic, no despair, just determined effort to recover and continue. "How?" she asked Captain Tae, who stood beside her. "How did you hold against such numbers?" Tae looked at his battered H. The Wraith and Dominion launched their counterstrike 3 weeks after Kavor Station fell. They committed 7 battle groups to retake the Tertian system, a strategic junction that controlled access to 3 coalition trade routes. It was the largest Vrathan offensive in the entire war. Admiral Hun, commander of the Human Expeditionary Fleet, studied the enemy formation from his flagship, the battleship Indomitable. He was an older man, his hair completely gray, his face marked with scars from a boarding action 20 years prior. He had fought in 7 campaigns across Earth's solar system before joining this mission. "They are coming in force," his tactical officer reported. "Estimated 3,000 Vathan vessels. They are using their standard hammer and anvil formation. Hyan nodded. The humans had been studying Vrathan tactics for weeks. They were aggressive but predictable. They relied on overwhelming force and intimidation. They expected their enemies to break and run. They did not understand that humans had spent 10,000 years fighting enemies who wanted to do exactly the same thing. Commander Nari, what is the status of the combined fleet? Hun asked. Commander Nari, the captain of the carrier group responded immediately. All coalition vessels have been repositioned according to the plan. Human carriers are holding position behind the third moon. Drone fighters are armed and ready for deployment. Good. Hyan opened a channel to the entire fleet, coalition and human vessels alike. All ships, this is Admiral Hun. The Vrathan believe they are attacking a weakened enemy. They expect us to retreat as we have done before. They are wrong. Today we show them what happens when predators fight predators. Today we hunt. Commander Hana, commanding the coalition forces from the Celestial Dawn, felt her heart racing. She had 50 coalition ships under her command. Against 3,000 Wrath vessels, the mathematics were clear. They would lose, but the humans had taught her something important. Mathematics were not everything. Strategy mattered, tactics mattered, and most importantly, the willingness to do whatever it took to win mattered. All coalition vessels prepare for evasive maneuvers, she ordered. Remember your training. We are not running away. We are leading them to slaughter. The Vrathan fleet entered the system with their usual aggression. They broadcast threats and demands for surrender. They accelerated toward the defensive positions, confident in their numerical superiority. Then the coalition fleet did something unexpected. They retreated. Hana watched the tactical display as her ships turned and fled, exactly as the Vrathan anticipated. The enemy command must have been pleased. This was what always happened. The coalition ran, and the Vrathan chased them down and destroyed them. They are taking the bait, Nari reported from her carrier. Vrathan forces are breaking formation to pursue. They want to catch us before we escape. Wait for it, Admiral Hun said calmly. He watched as the Vrathan ships spread out, each commander eager to claim kills. They were no longer a coordinated fleet. They were individual ships racing to be first to the slaughter. Now, Hian ordered. The third moon was not a moon. It was a debris field of ice and rock that had been there for millions of years. What the Breathan did not know was that hidden in that debris were 30 human carrier vessels. Their engines cold, their systems in standby mode. They woke up simultaneously. Carrier bays opened and thousands of small craft poured out. These were not manned fighters. They were drones. Automated attack craft controlled by artificial intelligence. Cheap to build, easy to replace, and utterly fearless because they had no crew to lose. The drone swarm hit the Vrathan fleet from the side. Small craft attached themselves to larger vessels and detonated, blowing holes in armor. Others targeted engines and weapon systems, crippling ships without destroying them. The swarm tactics were something from Earth's history. Strategies developed by humans fighting other humans when resources were scarce. The Wrathan fleet tried to defend itself, but they were designed to fight other large ships, not thousands of small, fast-moving targets. Their heavy weapons were too slow. Their point defense systems were overwhelmed. Coalition fleet reverse course, Commander Hana ordered. Her ships stopped retreating and turned back toward the enemy. Now the Vrathan were caught between the coalition forces and the drone swarm. Target their command ships, Admiral Hune commanded. Cut off their head, and the body will die. Human vessels pushed forward into the chaos. The Indomitable's main guns fired, sending rounds the size of small vehicles through space. They did not use energy weapons that could be deflected by shields. They used solid metal, moving at tremendous velocity. A Wrath and command ship took 3 direct hits. Its shield generators overloaded. Its hull cracked. Atmosphere and debris vented into space as the massive vessel began to break apart. Commander Nari coordinated the drone attacks with ruthless efficiency. Focus swarm units 7 through 12 on the eastern flank. I want their formation completely disrupted. Units 13 through 20 target their supply vessels. No fuel, no fight. Lieutenant Suman, one of the human tactical officers assigned to train coalition forces, watched as Lunari crews executed maneuvers they would have considered impossible a month ago. They were not fighting honorably anymore. They were fighting to win. A coalition light cruiser, the Morning Star, found itself surrounded by 3 Vrathan destroyers. The old tactics would have been to try to fight their way out to retreat and preserve the ship. Instead, the Morning Star's captain did what the humans taught her. She rammed the nearest Vrothan ship. Both vessels were destroyed in the collision, but it created an opening for 2 other coalition ships to slip through and attack the remaining Brathan destroyers from behind. 3 enemy ships for 1 coalition vessel. By human mathematics, that was a victory. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Vrothan kept fighting, but their coordination was gone. Their commanders were dead or unable to communicate. Their numerical advantage meant nothing when they could not organize it properly. Admiral Hune watched as the tide turned completely. Freen ships were fleeing now, trying to escape to faster-than-light travel. But human pursuit craft were faster. They had been designed specifically for this, for running down enemy vessels that thought they could escape. "Do not let them retreat intact," Hyan ordered. "I want them stranded. I want them unable to report back to their command." It was ruthless. It was calculating. It was the kind of warfare that the coalition had never practiced before, but it was saving lives. Every Vrothan ship destroyed here was a ship that would not attack coalition worlds. When the battle finally ended, the Tertian system was secure. The Vrothan had lost over 2,000 ships. The coalition lost 37 vessels. The humans lost 6, and all 6 were due to calculated sacrifices. Ships that deliberately put themselves in danger to save others. Commander Hana looked at the casualty reports with mixed feelings. They had won decisively, but the cost in Vrothan lives was staggering. Hundreds of thousands dead. Did that make them as bad as the enemy they fought? Captain Tay must have sensed her thoughts. His face appeared on her communication screen. "Commander, I know what you are thinking. You believe we have become monsters to fight monsters?" Hana said nothing, but her expression confirmed his guess. "War is not about being moral," Tay said quietly. "War is about survival. The Vathan would not hesitate to do the same to you. They have already done worse to your colony worlds. You did not start this war, but you have a responsibility to your people to end it. How do you live with it?" Hana asked. "How do you make these decisions and still sleep at night?" Tay was silent for a moment. "We remember why we fight. Not for glory or conquest, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Your people cannot fight this war the way it needs to be fought. So we fight it for you. And yes, it costs us something. Every human who has seen combat carries those costs, but we carry them so others do not have to." Admiral Hune's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. "All vessels secure your positions. Begin search and rescue operations for survivors, including Vrothan. Treat prisoners according to human protocols. Medical teams are authorized to provide aid to enemy wounded." That surprised Hana. After such brutality in combat, the humans still followed rules for prisoners. "We fight to win," Lieutenant Giwan explained, seeing Hana's confusion. "But once the enemy surrenders, they are no longer a threat. Treating prisoners well serves multiple purposes. It encourages others to surrender rather than fight to the death. It provides intelligence, and it reminds us that we fight for a reason, not from cruelty." Over the following days, word of the Tertian system battle spread across the galaxy. The Vrothan, who had been advancing steadily for 3 cycles, had suffered their first major defeat. And it was not just a defeat, it was a disaster. In the Vrothan capital, the Supreme Commander held an emergency council. They reviewed the battle footage. They analyzed human tactics. And for the first time in their long military history, they felt something unfamiliar: fear. They had encountered a species more aggressive than themselves, a species that fought with calculated ruthlessness and did not care about fair fights or honorable combat, a species that turned every rule of warfare into a weapon. They had encountered Deathworlders. The human fleet arrived exactly on schedule. That alone surprised Hana. Coalition forces were often delayed by ethical debates or safety concerns. The humans simply said they would arrive in 7 days, and 7 days later they appeared. But it was how they arrived that made every coalition officer stop breathing. There was no graceful exit from faster-than-light travel, no elegant deceleration. The human ships tore through the fabric of space-like predators bursting from cover. Their exit signatures were violent, aggressive, creating radiation spikes that set off every alarm on coalition vessels. Hana counted the ships, 43 vessels of varying sizes. Compared to the thousands the coalition had lost, it seemed insignificant. But something about these ships made her instinctively step back from the view screen. Coalition ships were beautiful. They had sweeping curves and artistic designs. Many had transparent sections to let their crews see the stars. They were painted in soft colors meant to promote calm. Human ships looked like they were designed to kill. They were angular slabs of gray metal, covered in armor plating. Weapon batteries protruded from every surface, like the spines of some ancient predator. There were no transparent sections, no artistic flourishes, no wasted space. Every centimeter was dedicated to either protection or destruction. The largest ship moved forward. It was monstrous, easily twice the size of the Celestial Dawn. Its hull was scarred and pitted, showing signs of previous battles. Humans did not hide their scars. They wore them like warnings. A communication signal came through. The translation system struggled for a moment before finding the right patterns. Coalition vessel Celestial Dawn. This is Captain Tay, of the Earth Defense Force ship Vanguard, requesting permission to board for tactical briefing. Hana's voice caught in her throat. She had invited them here. She had called for their help. But now, facing the reality of what she had done, fear crept up her spine. Permission granted. Captain Docking Bay 2. 20 minutes later, Hana stood in the docking bay with her senior staff. They watched the human shuttle approach. It was just as brutal and functional as their warships. No elegant design, just thick armor and engines. The shuttle landed with a heavy thud that made the deck plates shake. The hatch opened, and 3 figures emerged. Hana had seen images of humans in the reports, but nothing prepared her for meeting them in person. They were shorter than Lunari, but they moved with a weight and presence that made them seem larger. Their bodies were thick with muscle, adapted for their world's crushing gravity. They wore dark uniforms with various insignias and equipment attached. The one in front stepped forward. He was older than the others, his dark hair graying at the temples. His eyes scanned the docking bay with rapid, efficient movements, categorizing threats, even in a supposedly safe environment. Predator instincts. Commander Hana, I presume. I am Captain Tay. He extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Hana reached out carefully. The human's grip was firm, controlled, but she could feel the strength in it. Strength enough to crush her delicate bones if he chose to. This is Lieutenant G1, my tactical officer, and Private Minho, from our Marine detachment. The female officer nodded curtly. She was younger, with sharp eyes that never stopped moving. The Marine was built like a wall, carrying weapons openly, in a way that made Hana's security team nervous. Thank you for coming, Hana managed to say. We did not know if you would respond. You asked for help, Tay said simply. You explained the situation clearly. You provided coordinates. Why would we not respond? It was such a straightforward answer that Hana did not know how to reply. In coalition politics, everything had layers of complexity and debate. Perhaps we should discuss the tactical situation, Lieutenant Giwan suggested. Her tone was polite, but there was an edge to it. And impatience. They moved to the briefing room. Anna's officers looked uncomfortable around the humans. The humans walked with heavy footfalls, their boots striking the deck like small impacts. They spoke in voices that seemed too loud, too aggressive, even when being professional. And their eyes never stopped watching, analyzing, searching for threats that did not exist. Hana brought up the tactical displays and began explaining the war. She showed them the Vrath in advance, the worlds that had fallen, the battles they had lost. As she spoke, she watched the human faces carefully. Captain Tay's expression grew darker with each report. Lieutenant Jiwan took notes on a small device, her fingers moving with mechanical precision. Private Minho stood at attention near the door, but his eyes never left the room's entry points. When Hana finished, there was a long silence. Then, Captain Tay did something unexpected. He laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was harsh, bitter, filled with disbelief. You call this a war, he said, gesturing to the displays. This is not a war. This is a massacre. You have been fighting with one hand tied behind your backs. Hana felt her crest flattened in confusion. We have fought with everything we have. No, Lieutenant Giwan said flatly. She stood and manipulated the display, pulling up footage of coalition battles. You fight to minimize casualties. You avoid civilian areas. You try to disable enemy ships rather than destroy them. You warn them before you attack. You follow rules of engagement that assume your enemy will do the same. She pulled up footage of a Vrathan attack. The enemy ships did not avoid civilian areas. They targeted them specifically. They did not try to disable coalition ships. They destroyed them utterly. They did not warn before attacking. They ambushed from hiding. The Vrathan fight to win, Tay said. You fight to stay moral. Morality will not save you when you are extinct. The words hit like physical blows. Hana's officers bristled at the accusation. We cannot simply abandon our principles, one of them said. We are civilized beings. Civilized beings can die just as easily as any other kind. Private Minho spoke for the first time. His voice was surprisingly gentle, but the words were harsh. We have a saying on Earth, you can be right and dead, or alive and learning. Captain Tay leaned forward. Commander Hana, you called us because you are desperate. You called us because we are what you consider dangerous and violent. You called us because we are Deathworlders. He paused, letting that sink in. We will help you, but you need to understand what that means. We do not fight the way you fight. We do not follow your rules. We fight to end threats permanently. What are you suggesting? Hana asked quietly. Total war, Lieutenant Giwan answered. We teach you how to fight like humans, like predators, like beings who grew up on a world that tried to kill us every single day, and we survived anyway. Hana looked at her officers. She saw fear in their faces, fear of these humans and what they represented, fear of becoming something they were not. But she also saw the casualty report still glowing on the displays. 4 billion dead on Tertia 7 alone, dozens of worlds burning, billions more who would die if nothing changed. Show us, Hana said. Show us how Deathworlders fight. Captain Tay smiled. It was not a comforting expression. It was the smile of a predator who had just been given permission to hunt. We will need tactical data on Vrathan positions, supply lines, and command structure, Jiwan said, already pulling up star charts. We will plan a strike that will make them understand what they are now facing. Minho stepped forward. With your permission, I would like to begin training some of your security forces in human close starters combat techniques. Everything was moving so fast. The humans did not debate or discuss. They simply identified problems and created solutions. It was efficient in a way that made Hana dizzy. One more thing, Captain Tay said as they prepared to leave. When we strike, it will be violent. It will be brutal. You will see things that disturb you, but it will work. He looked directly at Hana. Are you ready for that? Hana thought about the billions already dead. She thought about the colonies still burning. She thought about the choice she had made when she sent that message to Earth. We are ready, she said. Teach us how to win. Commander Hana stared at the tactical display with tired eyes. 3 cycles of war had taken everything from her people. The blue lights representing coalition ships grew fewer each day, while the red markers of Vrathan vessels multiplied like a disease spreading across the star map. Another retreat, Commander? Her second officer asked quietly. Hana nodded. There was no shame in it anymore. Retreating had become their primary strategy. The Lunari were not warriors. None of the coalition species were. They built beautiful cities of crystal and light. They composed symphonies that could make stars weep. They had eliminated poverty and disease across 40 worlds. But they did not know how to fight a war like this. The Vrathan did. The Vrathan knew nothing but war. Hana's fingers trembled as she pulled up the casualty reports. The colony on Tertia 7 was gone. 4 billion Moran simply erased from existence. The Vrathan had cracked the planet's crust and boiled its oceans. It took them 6 hours. We have superior technology, one of the council members had said during the last meeting. Our ships are faster, our weapons more precise, our shields stronger, but it did not matter. The coalition fought to minimize casualties and preserve life. The Vrathan fought to kill everything that moved. When coalition ships tried to disable enemy vessels, the Vrathan rammed them with ships full of explosives. When coalition forces avoided civilian targets, the Vrathan used civilians as shields. Every ethical principle the coalition held dear became a weakness the Vrathan exploited. Ina walked through the corridors of her flagship, the Celestial Dawn. It was a beautiful ship, built more like a work of art than a military vessel. Smooth curves and transparent panels showed the stars outside. Every surface was designed to inspire peace and contemplation. It was designed by beings who thought war was something ancient and primitive, something they had evolved beyond. They were wrong. She reached her private quarters and sealed the door. From her desk, she retrieved a data chip that officially did not exist. The council had forbidden its use. They called it dangerous, reckless, potentially catastrophic. But Hana had stopped caring about the council's rules. Rules did not save her people. Rules did not stop the Rathan from burning their worlds. The chip contained a single file, First Contact Report. Species 7842, Sol System, Humidity, the Quarantine Death World. Hana had read the report 100 times. She had memorized every disturbing detail. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, one of the most hostile environments ever discovered. Its gravity was crushing. Its weather could kill in minutes. Its oceans contained predators the size of small ships. Its land was filled with venomous creatures, disease, and natural disasters. And somehow, impossibly, humans had become the dominant species. They were not the strongest creature on their planet. They were not the fastest or the most dangerous, but they were persistent. They were adaptable, and they were violent in ways that made the coalition xenologists physically ill. The report detailed human history, 10,000 years of continuous warfare. They fought over resources, over land, over invisible lines. They drew on maps, over ideas and beliefs. They invented weapons that could destroy their entire world, and they came within moments of using them multiple times. When the coalition discovered Earth, the debate lasted for years. Some wanted to make contact to guide this primitive species toward peace. Others argued for continued quarantine, insisting that humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too aggressive. The quarantine won. Earth was marked as forbidden space. No contact, no interference. Let them evolve or destroy themselves, but keep them contained. But Hana no longer had the luxury of following that decision. She needed something the coalition did not have. She needed warriors. She needed predators. She needed a species that understood war not as an unfortunate necessity, but as something they had perfected across millennia. She needed Deathworlders. Hana accessed the communication system and bypassed every security protocol she could find. The Council would strip her of command for this. They might imprison her, but none of that mattered if there was no coalition left to punish her. She recorded a simple message in the human language called English. The coalition's translation systems had decoded it years ago. This is Commander Hana, of the Lunari species, representing the Galactic Coalition. We are at war. We are losing. Our people are dying. We do not know how to stop it. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. We know you have been watching us. We know why you were placed under quarantine. We know what you are capable of. We are asking for your help. Will you fight for us? She attached the coordinates for a rendezvous point in neutral space, then added every piece of information humans would need. Star charts, tactical data, examples of Rathan attacks, casualty numbers. Then she transmitted it toward Earth and waited. 3 days passed. The Council discovered what she had done on the second day. They were furious. They called her a traitor, a fool, someone who had potentially doomed the galaxy by inviting monsters to join the war. The Council debated placing her under arrest. On the third day, a response came. It was brief, direct, and written in careful English that the translation system rendered into her language. Message received. Earth Defense Force mobilizing. Captain Tay commanding. We will arrive at your coordinates in 7 days. Humanity is coming. Hana felt something she had not felt in 3 cycles. Hope. But mixed with that hope was fear. She had read the reports. She knew what humans were capable of doing to each other. She had seen footage of their wars, their weapons, their capacity for destruction. She had invited predators to save them from predators. The question that kept her awake at night was simple. Would the cure be worse than the disease? She stood at the observation deck watching the stars. Somewhere out there, a fleet of Deathworlders was preparing for war. They were loading weapons onto ships designed for killing. They were training soldiers who grew up on a planet that tried to murder them every day. They were coming to a war they did not start to save species they had never met. Hana wondered what kind of beings would do that. She wondered what it would be like to meet creatures who saw violence not as a failure of civilization, but as a tool to preserve it. In 7 days she would find out. The celestial dawn maintained its position at the rendezvous coordinates. Around it the scattered remains of the coalition fleet gathered. 50 ships, all that remained of what had once been a force of thousands. They waited together in the darkness between stars. They waited for reinforcements. They waited for the Deathworlders. And the galaxy held its breath.